So, as I was saying, there's this global initiative to learn 30 letters from the Lubavitcher Rebbe that he addressed people like you and I who shared concerns and good news and not so good news and asked for advice, right? And so 30 letters were put together for women all over the world to learn 30 letters in 30 days leading up to the Rebbe's birthday, which is marked on the 11th of Nisan, okay, which is coming up. So right before Pesach, next week. So a lot of these letters that we've been learning the past few weeks talk about bitachon. Like I told you before, the Rebbe many times talked about trust. And in fact, very often, he specifically said to people to study the Gate of Trust. This book, this text from Rabbeinu Bachya, 1,000 years old, that we are learning today, to the point that I remember sharing with you in one of our first classes, possibly the first class, that this is one of the things that I said back in 2008 to my husband, like, what is this text that the Lubavitcher Rebbe keeps referencing to, right? Like, we should totally look into it. And back then there were few translations. There was one English translation that was okay. It wasn't super user friendly, but now we have this incredible translation. It's a little bit, the English is a little bit much more modern, easy to follow. Plus the Hasidic commentary really adds a lot. But why am I sharing this with you? Because I think I was sharing today with my husband and another couple who actually, I should mention them. The Felig, this text is sponsored by this book is sponsored by the Felig family, and I was having a conversation with this couple, the Feligs, and they were saying, like, now that they've been learning this for so many years, and they've been doing this together for the last 7 years. By the way, I sent a newsletter today. I don't know who of you saw it, regarding my top marriage advice. You must be thinking, where's she going with this? I have a point here, okay? Because when I was having this conversation with the Feligs, it reminded me of something that I recently shared at the Jewish Learning Institute when I was asked for a marriage tip of couples who were dealing with financial trouble. And I wrote today in my newsletter, this is my #1 marriage tip. Did anybody see it, Tavia? Did you see that? Okay, so what's the tip? So a lot of you maybe think, oh, she's going to talk about the money date. And while I do talk about the money date a lot, I think this tip that I'm about to give you, and I'm referencing the Feligs because they just told us that they do this as well. The tip is to sit with your spouse and learn Shara Bitachon. Now, ideally, you would do this every day, 1 page a day, 15 minutes before the children wake up. If you can't do this every day, you could do it once a week. You could do it on Shabbat morning, just short and sweet before you start your day. It puts you in another frame of mind. And it's interesting that they shared with me and my husband, with my husband and I, that they actually practice this. And I want to share with you guys something. I'm opening up my email right now because one of my newsletter subscribers wrote back about this marriage tip. And I think she said this even better than I could express it. She said, first of all, that she ordered the book, this book that we're learning. Thanks, Yael. I ordered the book immediately. I have found for any successful relationship, especially marriage, the main thing is to share the same values, both looking in the same direction. So I think we all know that, right? But then she says, if he looks at you and you look at him, there's always the possibility, God forbid, of looking over the shoulders at someone else. To look in the same Torah direction is an important habit. Continued success, blah, blah. Meaning to look at something that is above both of you, right? To develop a relationship that is beyond both of you, that relationship with God and that trust in God. Like I think I told you last week, and I've said many times, and people always are like, what? Why is she saying that? I always said, like, your husband doesn't need you to trust in him. And then people are like, what? Like, I don't, like, you really should trust in him. But what I mean is, what he really needs is a wife who trusts in God. Like, if you really want to help him in life, and help yourself, develop your trust in God. If you do it as a couple, oh my goodness, like it's such a life-changing experience for the both of you. So with that said, I got here like Proverbs 31. So I don't get the reference right away because I guess I'm not so fluent. But if you tell me what it means, Liz, what it says, then maybe we can unwrap it as well. We can unpack it. But so why did I get here? Because when we were having this conversation with the Felix today, my husband and I, one of the things that he stressed very much, Mr. Felix, was that he now understands how the Rebbe's continuous references to this text really means that he considered this to be a foundational text, meaning this is something that every Jew needs to learn and understand. Now, why it didn't make it into the mainstream curricula of Jewish education, we don't know. But the truth of the matter is that now it has become super popular, and for good reason. The timing couldn't be better, right? It's like, really, like there was a pandemic and this book was just coming out. I mean, prior to that, Hayeno, who published the book, was putting it in its by pieces, piece by piece, in its weekly publication, and I got really into it at that time. But in any case, the point being that, and my husband agrees with this, and he has realized this over time, is like all of the Hasidic texts that we've learned over the years already assumed that we grasp this, right? So now that we're learning it and we're grasping it, we can start going back to our Hasidic text and really like internalizing it on a deeper level, because it already assumed that you had this foundation. So it's really, what we're doing here really is really fundamental and really important work. Now, in this letter that I'm going to share with you, ladies, and I just learned it last night, the Rebbe doesn't say directly to the person writing the letter, learn Shar Bitachon, although he said it many times. But he again references Bitachon, he references trust. And it's in an interesting context because it's not something that we have discussed yet so profound. We did discuss this idea of engaging in an occupation or looking for an occupation that really maximizes your potential, your capabilities, your talents, and utilizes that, rather than trying to focus on something that is the thing that's going to make you money, because the money is not coming from the vessel, it's not coming from the thing, and God is going to have infinite vessels to send you the money. What God really wants you is for you to use your God-given talents and opportunities and all the things. We've talked about that, but here the Rebbe makes a little bit of a more nuanced point. This letter that I'm going to address to you right now is addressed to a father of a son, which presumably the Rebbe has already spoken about the topic with the son, and the son is suffering from tremendous anxiety. And the Rebbe is sharing with his father what he shared with his son. And I'm going to not do the whole letter, but I'm going to share bits and pieces, okay? And so I'm going to share bits and pieces, and we'll wrap it up and then tie it on to what we're learning today. So he tells his father, one of the important things that he's shared with the boy already is that it is explained in many places, and I'm reading straight from the text, from this letter, okay? Among them, in the book of Tanya from the Alter Rebbe, that a person does not know how they will support themselves. This lack of knowledge, meaning we don't know, like it's not given information for us. Like there's nowhere we can find out this information. It's kept a secret from man, okay? This lack of knowledge is compared to the lack of knowledge as to when the kingship of the house of David will return, meaning Mashiach. Just like we don't know when Mashiach is going to come, and Mashiach could come any minute, right? We also don't know how we are going to support ourselves. We don't know how our livelihood is going to come to us. We know that it comes, we just don't know how. Nonetheless, an attribute of of our generation, demonstrating the intensity of the exile, is to begin searching for a career from a relatively young age. So the Rebbe here is talking about a malady that we are suffering as a generation, which is this obsession from, and it gets earlier and earlier, right? Like if you imagine, like nowadays, like kids, like the amount of stress and that kids go through making a decision to go to college, and like the whole stress that we put on them, willingly or unwillingly, about making a choice as to what they're going to choose as a career, etc., is actually tremendous. And the Rebbe here says this is really a symptom of exile. A symptom of exile. We've been in exile for so long, and part of it comes with this mentality that we forget that really we don't have a say in the matter, right? God really is the one who knows how we will be supported, how we'll be, how our livelihood will come. But we've deluded ourselves to think that we have some control over this, and we start searching for a career really, really early on. And then the Rebbe continues to say that what this does is this disturbs all of the matters and procedures necessary to enrich a person with the true wealth of Judaism, meaning it's a distraction. It's like, if the Rebbe is saying this is a distraction for young people. Young people don't need to be worried about this. They need to be developing the foundation of their life, which is the relationship with God. They need to be learning. They need to be enthusiastic about who they are, where they're going. You know, it's funny, we're approaching Passover, right? And what do we do in Passover? We talk about our past. We talk about our identity, right? And why do we emphasize children so much on Passover, right? The Seder is all about engaging the children, right? Because in order for children to know where they're going, in order for anybody to know where they're going, they first have to know where they're coming from, right? They need to know where they're coming from. They need to be confident and secure on that. And by the way, one of the things that young, Jews, in America struggle with is like, they don't understand the meaning of what it is to be Jewish. They don't understand where they're coming from. They don't understand the legacy, right, that they've inherited, right? So I'm going back to the letter. The Rebbe is saying this is a distraction. It's a distraction to burden children and young adults with an obsession with a career. Really, what they need to be focusing is on what really is going to create wealth in their life, meaning a rich life on every level, which is having a solid relationship with the Creator and a positive engagement with His world of service and all the like having that mindset, that Jewish mindset, very sharpened and developed. That's what a child needs to be engaged with. So he says, everyone pretends to know the future, and it is therefore necessary to know that specifically when one will arrange for the education of their children and their own dealings according to the instructions of God, he will then be able to constantly support them. So if you take care of making sure that your children are confident and solid and engaged and really are focused on their relationship with God, then God is taking care of the rest. Because again, we go back to what we're learning here that Rabbi Novachia is saying. That's where it comes from. Do not even think for one iota that the vessel is responsible for a person's livelihood or for anything, for any result, right? So the Rebbe says, this is the only way, so to speak, that it is possible for God to support and provide for everyone with kindness and compassion. So you're connected to God, and it's always going to flow. We've talked about that, right? But you got to also put effort in being plugged to this, in being in this mindset. And then he says, indeed, the instruction of our sages, based on the verse, and Hashem, God, will bless you in all that you do, which we've said so many times, right? That's a verse from the Torah that is instructing us that we must do proper work to receive God's blessing. We must create that vessel. We must engage within nature, right? With the means, without giving them credit, is well known. So it's well known that this is what we need to do. Nonetheless, says the Rebbe, everything has its time. The preparation for work, it blew my mind what it says here. It says the preparation of work needs to begin close to the time of working, and even then, not in a manner which disturbs the fundamental matters of a person's life. The Rebbe doesn't say how close to the time of, materializing or working, right? He doesn't say how many months ahead or how many days before, how many months, how many days, how many years, but it's an interesting concept. The Rebbe is saying, again, there's a time and a place for everything, as King Solomon taught us, right? And this is not the time. And so he continues to, and there is a time, but it has to be closer to when a person has to go out in the world and actually engage with materiality, actually be concerned with making a livelihood. So the Rebbe says, to my distress, as with all these matters, this applies to your son, who seems to have been researching his career and what will be his livelihood for multiple years now for various reasons. So evidently, multiple years preparing and obsessing and, delving into this concern about livelihood is evidently not the right approach. And in this case, I'm not going to go into much of the rest of the letter, but what's happened to this boy is this has caused so much anxiety that it's manifested on a physical level. And the boy is now exhibiting certain signs of stress, like he's having some issues with his hand, and it's a whole thing. Maybe I'll share it. I'll put it in the chat in a minute, and then you can read it on your own. And I'll leave you the link to Rabbi Sheistaub, who did a beautiful job of teaching the letter. But what I want to stress is one last thing that the Rebbe says here, is that the Rebbe says, listen, I can't change your son's mind with just one conversation. This is going to take some time. It's impossible to change his entire outlook with one conversation, especially as it has been entrenched within his heart throughout the duration of many years, causing him to not even realize that this is the opposite of having bitachon. And so I think this is important for us to realize that, as I told you, first of all, there's a spectrum, right? And we're all navigating that spectrum of trust constantly, right? But the more we learn, and it takes time to kind of undo that whole habituation of worry and all the years of, and by the way, the world will tell you, like the world will sell you worry, and it will sell you have to react, and right? So it really takes a lot of unprogramming from our part, and the Rebbe is acknowledging it here, And also another point that comes through here is that we don't even realize that the way we're behaving and the way we're engaging with certain challenges and situations and reacting to them are the opposite of having bitachon, like I shared with you. And interestingly, the Felix shared with my husband and I today, similar situation where she said, like, I had an illusion of bitachon, right? And I could totally relate to that. Like I'm a woman of faith, right? I've told you this many times, right? Like I woke up one day, I was like, what do you mean I don't have trust? Like I keep Shabbat, I keep kosher, right? Right? But there's a big difference between having faith, as we've discovered through our exploration of the text, and really exhibiting trust, really, really developing this fundamental tool. We have access to it, but it just has to be developed. And there's so much unlearning and unprogramming that needs to be done. And so the Rebbe says that with proper contemplation, it is recognizable and clear that this also opposes the belief in divine providence, that God is omnipotent, right? When we are so obsessed with certain things of our material existence, we're literally like denying that God is the one in control, that God is the one who's intervening every second of our life, making everything happen and making creation happen, including our own creation, right? It's obvious that if he would come to this understanding, he would fight against his outlook due to his innate fear of Hashem. So he's a God-fearing person. It happens to be that this boy is a God-fearing person. And what's interesting about this letter, which I didn't tell you because I didn't want to get too carried away, but the career that the boy is looking is actually a Torah career. He's looking into becoming a shochet. So even that, like the Rebbe is not talking to a boy who's obsessed with, going into business school or becoming a doctor. No, he's talking to a boy who became obsessed with this idea of livelihood. And he became so infatuated with the fact that only through this path, and it says it in the letter, you can read it on your own, he will find a livelihood. And it's causing him such anxiety that his hands are not working properly. And then he tries to hold the shkita knife and he can't do it. And so it's like a vicious cycle. And the Rebbe talks about the vicious cycle and gives him some practical tips to how to kind of disconnect from this. It's a beautiful letter, but I think it really brought a lot of points that I think we're trying to, nurture within ourselves and develop. And so that is that letter. I really, really would love for you guys to, and I'll send you guys, again, I'll put it at the end when we're doing Q&A, I'll put the link and I'll put the text on the chat. Okay, so that is one idea that I wanted to share with you guys, and how, this is, it's so subtle. The whole bitachon thing is so subtle, but like the more we work on it, just as subtle as it is that the lack of bitachon creeps in, the more we work on it, right, subtly, it also creeps in a positive way, right? That search engine optimization now can turn to right away to look for trust. I am safe. I'm in God's hands, et cetera, instead of panic and fear and all the other things that maybe we might have been used to in the past. Okay, so we were in our text talking about the how to engage, how does one exhibit bitachon, and we talk about in the case of our needs, our immediate needs of our body. And I think by now we are in relation to our possessions, right, the things that we obtain, and really the vessel and the means. So now what we're about to start is how to correct, so to speak, when a person mistakenly thinks that it is the means that cause the success, right? And we already had it, we've been introduced to this idea, there's no causality, right? There's only causality by God, meaning the means are not the cause of the result. But of course, especially when it comes to financial matters, and we've also discussed it in terms of health matters as well, we tend to think that the means of livelihood are exactly what is causing that success. So let's look inside the text. He says, Rabbeinu Bachya says, among those who seek wealth, there are those who obtain all their desires through one of the various means of obtaining a livelihood that we mentioned above. And we talked about different professions that he mentioned, like any of those means, right? While there are others who obtain their desires through an inheritance or the like. So you can get what you need and want. And we talked about the fact that some people get exactly what they need, and then some people get what they need and more to share with others and to support others. And that's based on merit. Everybody gets exactly what they need to sustain their body, right? But there's a level extra that really depends, God decides based on merits that we don't necessarily understand. And it might not even be our merits, it might be merits of our fathers, or it might be merits kind of on credit because we're gonna shift our life and God knows that, or whatever it might be, okay? But basically, you can get your livelihood through the means that you've crafted for yourself. So I'm a carpenter, and the carpentry sustains me, so to speak, right? It doesn't, but that's why I use air quotes. Or we could just, like, out of the blue, get an insurance claim or get an inheritance, or or something that has nothing to do with the vessel that I've designed myself through my labor, through my effort. That person thinks that it is the means of livelihood or the inheritance that made him wealthy, and without them, he would not have obtained any money at all. He praises the means and not the cause, God. Okay, so that's the mistake that the person is making. And I want to stop here and share another story that just happened to me today. Again, if you tune into this, like, these things just like happen all the time. So I'm having a conversation with a friend, and we end up talking about a little bit about financial matters. She was asking me a question on money and the like. And, she started telling me a story about a sibling who got a job offer with Google in the early days of Google. And it wasn't the super early days, but it was early enough that the price of Google stock was, reasonable. And they made him a job offer that included stock options in Google. That was part of his bonus, right? And so he consulted with his another family member, and this family member was a little bit skeptical of stocks and whatever, and he said, well, I don't know, I really think perhaps you should how much is the stock really going to go up? You really should ask them if they could give you the bonus in cash. So he asked for the bonus in cash, and Google said no, like, this is your offer, your salary and stock options. And the boy really liked the job opportunity and whatever it was, and he decided to take the offer. Well, my friend says, well, and to my family member's surprise, who had said, really ask for cash, let's just say like this. I think it was his brother or whatever, whoever, I think it's this person's brother, says, my brother is set for life. And right there, I stopped her. I said, no, she said something like, and thanks to Google, my brother is set for life. And I said, no, not thanks to Google. Thanks to God, who put him in a place where Google gave him the stock options. He is set for life, right? So, even from a neuro-linguistic programming standpoint, we have to be careful. We have, my friend is tremendously into this theme. So obviously, we just speak like this casually, but it's beautiful for us to engage and remind ourselves, like, she's cognizant of this, right? And she admitted, yes, of course, it's God, right? But it's important for us to recognize and be even careful with our use of language, right? Like and share with others when those shifts need to be made, because it affects how we think. Again, we can't even delude ourselves for 1 second that is really Google who made the boys set for life, right? And again, the money could disappear tomorrow, God forbid. Of course not. We wish everybody well and wealth and all the things. But meaning we have to understand that it's God who presented that opportunity for the person and allowed it to materialize it in that way. So this is what he's teaching us here. And that's why I remembered the story of this conversation that I was having with my friend. All right. So this person is similar to a person traveling in the desert who becomes dehydrated and finds bitter water in a well. And he greatly rejoices at finding the water and quenches his thirst with it. Okay, so he's traveling in the desert, he's parched, and he finds water, but it's awful water. It's bitter water, but he takes it. However, as he journeys a little further, he finds a spring that is flowing with sweet water. So he's distressed that he previously drank the bitter water and quenched his thirst with it. So basically, if somebody that he trusted had told him, just wait, because in a few feet, you're going to find what is really good for you, right? You would have not this person would have not put themselves through the pain of drinking that bitter water. But, and he's going to explain, a little bit more this analogy. Evidently, this is not what this person in the example did. So similarly, now he's going to explain the analogy. He says, similarly, the wealthy person whose wealth reached him through a particular means that involved much toil. And by the way, by much toil, I really think it's referring not just to hard work, but unethical or questionable means or going against God's will, like that type of exertion, kind of like the we've talked about it before, I have to open my store on Shabbat because I won't have any money, right? Like that kind of, or I have to engage in questionable business because, I have to close this deal at all costs kind of thing, okay? So the person is involved, in something that involved much toil. Were he to have stopped himself from engaging in that particular means, he would have managed to obtain his wealth through different, easier means, as explained earlier. So less difficult and ethical and aligned with God's will, right? That type. So basically, the difficult work that he engaged with is like drinking the bitter waters. Were he to have realized that there's no need for this because there's a God who provides and he doesn't have to bend over backwards to get his water, right? He just has to follow the path and trust in God, and it's going to flow easily. Then he would have been drinking the sweet water. Okay, as it says in Shmuel, for with the Lord there is no limitation to save with many or with few, meaning God can do anything and everything. Okay, so you don't have to choose the difficult path, for sure not the unethical path, right? Because God is able. He doesn't forget about you, right? We talked about the characteristics of trust, right? And we said that an entity on which we place trust, and one of the characteristics is he can never forget you, like, right? And the only one who can do that is God Almighty, right? Anybody else can forget, and he has to be available 24/7, right? But if you call me at 3 in the morning, maybe I can't help you at 3 in the morning, right? But God can help you at any time, and he's never going to forget anybody, right? That's among 7 other characteristics that we learned before, okay? So he is going to provide. He has an unlimited means to provide. Okay, so now what about financial struggles? So what about when this person is really finding themselves with limited livelihood, or maybe no livelihood? what should be the attitude? What should he be thinking? And Rabbeinu Bachya now is going to give like different reflections for this individual. Let's see. The proper thing for a person who trusts in God to do during the days in which his livelihood is withheld from him is to say to himself, and by the way, I have to make a parenthesis again here because I don't know if I've emphasized this enough, even though I just told you at the beginning of class the story about dating with your husband in terms of the gate of trust date. But, whether you're struggling or not, if you're struggling, all the more so, I need to exhort anybody here who's married. If you're not married, you're learning this already here every single week. That's incredible commitment. If you want to do more, okay? But if you are in a relationship, please, by all means, try to separate some time consistently where you can reflect on these ideas, a page a day or a page a week, if that's all you can do, because it's going to put you both on a higher level and make you both like zoom out of the problem. Okay. But anyway, let's see also what Rabbeinu Bachya says a person who is having difficulties needs to say to himself. He should say to himself, he who brought me out of the womb into this world at a specific time and specific moment, and who did not bring me into the world before that time or afterwards, he is the one who is withholding my sustenance from me until a specific time and a specific day in accordance with what he knows to be best for me, right? So he made me. He brought me to the world at exactly the right time. He right now he might not be sending that sustenance, but it's really because he's withholding it for me till a specific time where I really, really need it. And only he knows why that is best for me, but he does what is best for me. So evidently we can see that this is obviously a very high level. And a person, as we've talked before, this requires already a precedent of faith, right? We have to have that faith and that belief that there's a God in the world who's running the show and who the way he runs the show is always good. Similarly, when his sustenance comes to him, but is limited, and he receives no more than what he needs for his food, it is proper to think to himself and say, he who prepared my food for me in the bosom of my mother when I was born, according to my needs and enough to sustain me each and every day until he exchanged it for better food, and the fact that the milk was limited did not harm me whatsoever, so too this limited sustenance, which is according to my needs, like right now, to which God has currently brought me to, will not harm me whatsoever, even if it continues this way until the end of my life. So it's like this person needs to fall back on that belief that God sustained him in the womb, and it was limited amount, but it was enough for him to live until he was ready for real food, right? And so in the same way, right now he's limiting my means, but like he's going to shift that, and it's exactly what I need at the moment. If he keeps going, bringing that point of reflection, right? And then he says, a person who relies on God, despite his minimal livelihood, will be rewarded for doing so, which is an incredible point. And further down in the text, he's really going to get a little bit more detailed on this. As the Creator said regarding our forefathers in the desert, whose situation was similar to this person, as evident from the verse, and the people shall go out and gather what is needed for that day. So what is he talking about? And this is really, really important. It's a really important part of Torah that really can help us. And we read this every year, but I don't know if we really take the time to reflect on what it means to us in 2022. He's talking about the Jews in the desert, right? He's talking about what we're about to experience. He's talking about the Jews leaving Egypt, becoming a nation, free people who are about to receive the Torah, right? And that's going to give them real freedom, but we can get into that topic later, right? And they're going to trust that God is going to sustain them. And that's exactly what he did. And as we know, the way it worked is that the manna, the man that fell from heaven, was only for that day, meaning you couldn't save for the next day. it's a crazy concept for us because we have refrigerators that store our food, and we have bank accounts, and we have investment accounts, right? You have to understand that the way God trained us to be, we have to understand that the journey in the desert was really a preamble. It was a training ground for entering the land of Israel, meaning for entering the world, for entering reality as you and I know it today, meaning a reality where we have to engage and we have to work and we have to toil, right? That period of time was the training for us to know how to approach life, a life of engagement with physicality. And that's why we were giving our needs in a measured way every single day, to understand that whatever we need, we are going to get. But there's more, and I actually want to read it straight from the footnote here because it's explained so beautifully. Okay, and another thing that it says here, but I'll just summarize it, is that it is some people do have the custom to read the parsha that talks about the man, some daily, some frequently, perhaps not daily, again as a means to strengthen that trust, because the man is all about trust. The fact that we got it every day, that we had exactly what we needed. You couldn't save it. It was exactly what you needed. And the fact that depending on how you were holding in your relationship with God, you had to make a little bit of effort or no effort, right? As we're going to see today. The manna was provided by God with minimal effort required by the Israelites. It was therefore called bread from heaven. We do, however, find that a person's status affected his portion, as the Talmud teaches. For the righteous person, it was ready bread. For an average person, it was cake. And for the wicked, it was something they had to grind. So we already started to learn that we get it from heaven, but we also have to toil. We also have to do something, right? There was a merging of duality. The merging of this duality, that on the one hand, it was God's bread and man did not toil for it, right? It's just coming down. And on the other hand, there is human interaction involved in the receiving of the manna. It teaches that a person is not only supposed to acknowledge that the supernatural comes from God, like the man, but that his efforts and all the natural means through which he earns a livelihood are internally intertwined with God, and that it is God who delivers his sustenance in a supernatural way through a natural conduit. So it's God who is doing it in a miraculous way, yes, through a natural conduit. Like, I have to go and buy the bread in the supermarket, right? I have to knead the bread. I have to prepare it. Right? But it's God who's giving it, so, right? So this leads to the following realization. Number one, if a person desires wealth and creates a vessel for livelihood, it is not considered asking for a miracle, because this is the way God supports his creations. He does it through a vessel, supernatural giving through natural human-made vessel. And the limitations of the vessel are not a limitation for God. And this is so important, right? You create the vessel, but the vessel is limited. And that's okay. That's okay, because that limitation is just for the vessel, but God is providing and God is not limited. And this was again part of my conversation today with the Felix about, like, Mrs. Felix was saying, like, we have to get the part that we are Jews. And so our connection to God is super rational. It's transcending all of it, right? So yeah, I'm doing all these things, but again, God is acting miraculously constantly, and I have access to that constantly. Okay. Number two, on the other hand, the person must acknowledge that whatever he received is a miracle, right? We have to say, like, we can't take it for granted. We really can't. We tend to like it's literally a miracle every day, like manna from heaven. You think, oh, okay, so my employer paid me. No. Like, it's a miracle that this is coming to you. It's so, talking about miracles, and this is one of those, okay, not related to money but related to health. I have a child who needs a specific very strong medication, and this medication is, you won't believe it, but every shot, every injection of this medication costs $11,000. Now God bless them, but like, I don't just have $11,000 per shot, and this shot has to happen every 3 months, okay? You do the math. In order for insurance to help with this medication, there's a whole application process, and there's a whole finagling, like you have to make tons of phone calls and this and that. The first 2 times that we had to buy this medication, thankfully it was approved, and we tried the medication, and thankfully it was super effective. So now we're like, okay, so we need the 3rd dose of the medication, right? The doctor told us, okay, now it's time for the 3rd dose of the medication. So we're trying to get the medication, and we've been on the phone, not me, I have to give credit to my husband. He's been on the phone trying to get this approved and negotiate. And again, there's like a whole interesting process of getting, negotiating and trying to get insurance to cover for this 3rd dose of the medication. And would you believe that as easy as it was to get it approved the first 2 times, this time they didn't approve it. Like they really, really didn't. And my husband hadn't told me. And within a couple of hours of this, he getting the final say that it's not approved, he gets a note from the doctor who says, oh, don't worry, we have a sample in the office, just bring him in and we'll give him medication. Like when does that happen? In what universe of that does that happen? It happens in a universe of a year, period. And we have to recognize, we can't say, oh, the doctor. No, of course we have to thank the doctor, but it's not the doctor. We have to realize it's the same doctor 6 months ago when this whole thing started could have said, don't even try to apply for the medication, right? Because I have samples in my office, I could give it. No, that never happened. Like you have to go and apply the specific medication, a whole ordeal, right? This one time of all the times we get rejected and we stay totally calm. Like my husband was totally calm, right? I knew this was happening in the background. I didn't know that they had gotten a final no, but I knew that there was definitely a struggle. And I remember telling my husband, you know what? I've been praying for this, and I've been praying to God, like, if this is what he needs, if he does need another dose of the medication, let it be easy. And if what this means is that God is telling us, I don't need you to take this medication anymore, then okay, like let it be that we don't get the medication. You know what I mean? Like I'm entrusting this thing to God. I know it's a struggle, but I know that you're going to take care of the child. And would you believe that the doctor just like said, oh, I have a sample in the office, just come and give him the medication. So I was like, and again, I have to share it because I have to also internalize. I have an obligation, and I'm teaching you to do this as well, right? When these things happen, it's not enough to go 2 seconds, oh, that was nice, God. Like we have to share it because that's reprogramming. We have to reflect, at the very least, reflect on it for more than 2 seconds. But if we can, we have to articulate it, right? So thank you for allowing me to share that miracle story. Okay, so whatever he received is a miracle, okay? God chooses to sustain him just as he chose to sustain the Israelites with manna. It is merely the packaging that changes. With one package is a miracle and the other is nature. By the way, one time the packaging in the case of this medication was nature, right? Oh, it's the pharmaceutical company who approved, who approved through the insurance company who approved the medication, nature. This time, the 3rd time I was about to give the dose, oh, it's packaged as a miracle, right? It's all the same. It was God providing the medication that the child needed at the time that the child needed, right? But I could delude myself to think that it's my effort and it's my negotiation with the insurance company and it's a pharmaceutical company and the agreement that they have and no. Or I could delude myself to say, oh, it's the doctor. No, it's not the doctor. It's God choosing whatever intermediary needs to be chosen or merits to be chosen, and this time to give the child what he needs. All right. Number 3, true trust exists not only when there is nothing left to hope for and when there is a need for a miracle. Rather, even, this is an important word here, even if the person has a straw to hold on to, an occupation or a doctor or a medication, he can also demonstrate true trust in God, knowing that it is God who provides daily. And I think that's what we just exhibited, but not with livelihood, but with health. Okay. So yeah, there's a straw to hold on to, like there's an insurance company and there's a doctor and there's this and this. No, we have to recognize it's really, we have to trust that it is God who's going to provide it. Number 4, there is no need for daily worry for sustenance, thinking that if he were wealthy, worry would not be necessary. God provides for man, whether in a natural or supernatural manner, and he does this daily. Financial worry stems from a blurring of this reality. And that's really what it is, right? Financial worry is a lack of trust. Okay. And again, I don't say that in a, I don't mean to say it in like a preachy type of way. We all struggle with it, right? That's why we're here. We're all working on this. That's why we're learning the text. But we realize that that's the reality. And so that's aiming for, to correct it and reprogram ourselves. And not just us. This is for everybody. Like, this is something, like I said at the beginning of today's class, that is it's a fundamental Jewish text. Okay, so this was all a footnote too. Okay, so I'm back on the top of page 146. As it says, go and call out in the ears of Jerusalem, saying, so says the Lord, I remember regarding you the loving kindness of your youth, the loving of your nuptials. You are following me in the desert and land not sown. So God is reminiscing about the Jews' commitment to follow God in the desert, not knowing what was going to be, and basically completely entrusting themselves and their lives to God in a barren desert. Now he's going to talk to us about, maybe you get your livelihood in a way that is not what you wanted, is not what you prefer. Similarly, if his sustenance comes through a means that he didn't want, or from a place that he did not want, or if he received his livelihood from a person he did not want to receive it from, he should say to himself, he who fashioned me with a particular form and shape, with certain character traits and dimensions, and did so because this is what is best for me, he is the one who chose for me that my sustenance should come about in ways that are most suitable for my purposes, and not in other ways that are not in my best interest. So again, he's giving us the reflections, what to fall back on if we're in that situation. He continues with another reflection for a similar situation. He who brought me out of my mother's womb into this world in a specific place and through 2 particular parents, and not through any other people in the world, he is the one who chose for me that my sustenance should come in a certain land and through a certain person. He chose that person or place to be the means of my livelihood for my good, as the verse states, the Lord is righteous in all his ways. So nothing is coincidence. Everything that is happening is planned and orchestrated. God has my back. And if he's chosen that this is how it's going to come, then he must have a good reason. Now, he's already up to this point, and we're actually, I don't think I'm going to enter this territory, but he's up to this point told us, how do we relate to, how do we manifest bitachon and trust in matters that pertain to our body, right? To our physical material needs of ourselves. Then the next category was our stuff, our materiality, our possessions, right? That's what we just finished. And now he's going to talk about the third category, which is the circle of influence, which is really his wife or her husband, whatever, the children, the members of the family members, the friends, the enemies, the colleagues, like the people around you. Okay, so he's going to talk about how we deal in those situations. How do we exhibit bitachon or trust in those situations? I'm actually going to say just the first part, and then we'll open it up for questions. Okay, so however, the explanation regarding the proper bitachon in the third category, which is comprised of those matters that pertain to his wife, children, members of his household, relative, friends, enemies, people whom he holds in high esteem, acquaintances, as well as superiors and subordinates from different classes of people, the proper way to rely on God regarding them is as I will relate. A person cannot escape from one of the following 2 scenarios. Either he will be estranged, living alone, right? He will be lonely, or he's going to live amongst his family and close ones. So he's going to break it up in scenarios, and this is where we're going to pick it up next week. Well, not next week. Yeah, next week. We still have time next week. When is possible? It's not this Friday, it's next Friday. So we can still meet next week. Okay. But basically, he's going to break it up for us into these 2 scenarios. So when it pertains to your relationships, you're either in one camp. You're either in a camp where you have pretty much nobody, around you. You're living a lonely life for whatever reason, right? Maybe you've traveled a lot. Maybe people, around you have passed away, or whatever it might be. We're going to see in the text. Or you have many people that you relate to. So in all those circumstances, how does bitachon apply? How does it manifest? How should it be manifest in your life? Okay, so I am going to ask if there is any questions. I'm going to check the chat as well. Oh, what should I repeat? I'm sorry, Liz, I wasn't paying attention to the chat. Could you please repeat it? What was I repeating? The marriage tip? That you want me to repeat what the tip is? Oh, maybe she's not there. Oh, Sherry, you made it to class. Good. Okay. Yes, the marriage tip. The marriage tip that I gave in my newsletter and I share with you guys today is to learn with your husband, Shar Bitachon, this book that we are learning right here, 1 page a day. Wake up before the children at 6 or at 5:30 when the house is quiet and nobody needs you yet, and don't check your email and don't engage with the world, and make yourselves a cup of coffee and just sit and learn a page a day. I think it's one of the best things that you could do for a relationship, to nurture trust in God together. It really will elevate you together and will bring you above the challenge. Inevitably, life is full of challenges, and inevitably when you're in a relationship, you're facing challenges together, and that adds to the turbulence, so to speak, right? So you want to engage in something that it's kind of like lahavdil, like going to therapy, right? You go to a third party to help you, right? Kind of like look at this from another perspective, kind of get out of yourself. So what I'm saying is, this is not that there's no place for therapy, God forbid, that there's also a place for therapy, but this is not to the exclusion of, okay? So it's a nice tip, and I've done it for many, many years with my husband. I've just shared with you another couple who also swears by it, and that is, okay, what else do I have in the chat? I have made reading the chapter of manna as part of my everyday prayers. That's so beautiful. Good for you. That is, so you've done it before, or you just committed to it? I think you mean that you have made it, like that's a commitment that you've made and you've been practicing. I think that's what that means. Correct me if I'm wrong, and congratulations. I think that's great. Okay, any questions? Any question? And by the way, you should know that I've said that I'm going to do that many times and I haven't committed to it. So maybe that'll be my next thing. I don't know. Yes, you've been doing it for the last 2 years. That is so amazing. Keep it up. So maybe this is another thing that you can add, a page of Sharp, or just coming to this class every week. I mean, that is also in and of itself a huge commitment to developing the relationship. And I was talking to Sherry in the group. Sorry, Sherry, I'm going to, kind of put you on the spot, but even Sherry's been saying that coming to this class really, it's helping her, and I'm happy to hear. And I would love to hear, like, if it's coming up for you, if you're having certain interactions where, like, in a few months ago, your default state would have been another reaction, but you caught yourself reacting differently and going to more of a place of trust. Please share with me or share with the class, because I think it helps us all. It really, really does. So the reason I share with you also my own stories is so that you also get that this is a process and we can do this and we should do it and we should support each other through the process. So yeah, I know for Sherry, she's always been telling me that it helps her, especially with the news. And I always say, guys, just don't watch the news. Just don't watch it. But if you have to watch it, then at least, like, build some immunity. So learn Yael Trusch. That'll help. Okay, anybody else? Any comments, any questions? Are we good? Okay, then I will see you next week on Tuesday, and then we'll take a break for Passover and we'll resume after, but I will see you here next Tuesday. Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you for joining. Share with your friends, and let's see each other here on Tuesday. Any questions? I think you all know where to find me. You can always DM me on Instagram or shoot an email, and I'll be happy to answer or bring the question to class. Okay, have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.